Welcome to City Vision University's podcast, providing book summaries of books on rescue missions, city missions, and the Salvation Army.
Glad to be here, and we've got a really fascinating topic today.
Yeah, we really do. So I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine you are knocking on a door in a filthy, typhus-ridden slum in London.
Right, like 1830s London, so things are pretty grim.
Exactly. It's the 1830s. You walk in expecting to, I don't know, teach a starving family how to pray, and instead the mother of the family recites a literal medieval magic spell to protect her bed.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is wild. And the craziest part is that wasn't a rare anomaly.
No, not at all.
That was the reality of this massive, unbridgeable chasm in working-class London between, say, 1828 and 1860.
Yeah, it was a tale of two completely different cities, really.
Exactly. On one side, you have these wealthy, middle-class churchgoers living in, very comfortable respectability.
Right.
And then on the other side, literally just down the road, you have the utterly destitute, urban poor living in these crowded, disease-ridden rookeries.
And, the traditional structures of support like community and local parishes, they had completely buckled.
Right, because of the Industrial Revolution, right.
Yeah, exactly. The Industrial Revolution brought this unprecedented wave of urban migration. So the old rules, they simply didn't apply anymore.
Which brings us perfectly to the source for this deep dive.
Yes.
We are unpacking Donald M. Lewis's book, Lighten Their Darkness, The Evangelical Mission to Working-Class London, 1828 to 1860.
It is such a detailed look at this exact crisis.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore this really fascinating historical paradox.
Which is how a desperate, highly practical need to reach the poorest of the poor forced these bitterly divided religious factions to actually unite.
Right. And the wild part to me is that in doing so, they basically accidentally laid the groundwork for modern social work.
Yeah, and public health initiatives, too.
Completely by accident. But I mean, to grasp how monumental this unity was, you have to understand the sheer venom of the religious landscape back in the 1820s.
Oh, yeah. The tribal division was intense. I mean, deeply, deeply toxic.
Set the stage for us. Who are the players here?
So on one side, you have the established Church of England, the Anglicans.
Right, the big guys.
Yeah. They enjoyed massive state support, immense wealth, and of course, a lot of political power.
Okay, and who's on the other side?
On the other side, you have the groups they called the Nonconformists, or the dissenters.
Dissenters, okay. Like who?
This would be groups like the Methodists, the Congregationalists, and the Baptists.
Got it. Now, to a modern ear, that might just sound like, a polite disagreement over some fine points of theology.
Right, like maybe they just disagree on how to run a Sunday service.
Exactly. But in the 1820s, it wasn't polite at all. It was an existential turf war.
It absolutely was. And you really have to look at the shadow of the French Revolution to understand why.
Oh, because they were terrified of an uprising.
Exactly. The Anglican establishment, they basically equated the religious enthusiasm, as they called it, and the independent thinking of the dissenters with sheer political radicalism.
Like, if you let people think for themselves at church, they'll overthrow the king.
That was literally the fear. To the Anglicans, questioning the hierarchy of the church was just step one toward overthrowing the entire government.
Wow, so they weren't messing around?
Not at all. You had these hardline Anglican publications, like there was this one newspaper called The Record.
The Record, right.
And they were launching just ruthless daily smear campaigns against dissenters.
Just dragging them in the press.
Totally. And this whole hostility was supercharged by this thing called the voluntary controversy.
What was the voluntary controversy?
It was basically this fierce national debate over whether churches should continue to receive state funding or if they should rely purely on voluntary contributions.
Money. It always comes down to money. So the way I think about it, it's like a massive societal Jenga tower.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. So to the Anglicans, church and state were these deeply intertwined blocks in the Jenga tower. And if you let a dissenter pull out the, respect for bishops block, you completely risk the respect for the monarchy block crashing down right behind it.
That is exactly how they viewed it.
And the tragic irony here is that they were so busy fiercely protecting their tower from each other.
Yep.
That they completely ignored the fact that the table the tower was sitting on, which is the city of London itself, was basically collapsing.
Yeah, it was collapsing under the sheer weight of these rapidly expanding slums.
Right. So eventually, the sheer scale of all this human suffering forces a system crash, essentially.
It did. It forced a radical rethinking of the rules. Because, look, the traditional Church of England operated on a parish model.
Meaning one church for a specific area.
Exactly. One clergyman oversaw a specific geographic footprint.
Which I imagine works beautifully if you're in a sleepy rural village of 500 people.
It works perfectly there. But it catastrophically fails when suddenly 50,000 desperate factory workers move into that exact same geographic area.
Right, the system just breaks.
It broke completely. The traditional clergy were completely overrun. They couldn't keep up.
So this sets up an unavoidable wake-up call, which happens around 1835, right?
Yes. In 1835, you have a prominent clergyman named Baptist Noel.
And he publishes this massive bombshell pamphlet.
Yeah, it was called The State of the Metropolis Considered.
Catchy title.
Very Victorian. But he drops a statistic in it that absolutely shocked the public.
What was the number?
He estimated that over 500,000 Londoners were completely unchurched, living in deep poverty and vice.
500,000. That is a massive portion of the city back then.
It was huge. They were basically completely disconnected from the moral and social fabric of the entire nation.
Okay, so everyone is panicking. What's the solution?
Well, the proposed solution came from this very eccentric Scottish man named David Naismith.
Naismith, right.
Yeah. He founded an organization called the London City Mission, or the LCM.
Okay, the LCM. What was his big idea?
Naismith basically looked at the situation and realized that the traditional university-educated clergy were totally failing to cross the class barrier.
Because they had nothing in common with the people they were trying to reach.
Exactly. I mean, a guy in a fancy collar speaking high society English, he just wasn't going to get through to a starving dock worker.
No, the dock worker would probably just laugh him out of the room.
Right. So Naismith's radical idea was to use lay agents.
Meaning regular people.
Yes. Regular, unordained, working class and middle class people. His plan was to have them go door to door in the slums.
Okay, but wait, hang on.
Yeah.
If the Anglican establishment was so obsessed with hierarchy and rules like we just talked about.
Very obsessed.
And they were terrified of any threat to their Jenga tower.
Right.
Why on earth would they accept unordained rogue agents doing a priest's job?
It's a great question.
Especially if these agents were working alongside the very dissenters they completely despised.
Yeah, it seems like a total contradiction.
Yeah.
But the catalyst for that change was just pure bottom line desperation.
Desperation.
That and the power of incredibly wealthy laymen.
Money again.
Always money. You had incredibly rich Anglican businessmen, like a brewer named Robert Hanbury.
Okay, Hanbury.
And Hanbury had personally funded the building of several new Anglican churches in deeply impoverished areas, like Bethnal Green.
Okay, so he built the churches. Did anyone show up?
No. That was the problem. When they opened the doors, the pews just sat completely empty. The working poor simply wouldn't go inside.
Wow. So he spent all this money for nothing.
Right. So men like Hanbury essentially used their massive checkbooks to force the Anglican establishment's hand.
How did they do that?
They went to powerful figures like Bishop Blomfield and basically said, look, we're going to fund these unordained pan-evangelical workers.
Whether you like it or not.
Exactly. Because, as Hanbury saw it, they were the only ones willing to actually go into the rookeries and get results.
So money talked. And suddenly that rigid hierarchy became very, very flexible.
It's amazing how quickly theology adapts when the funding is on the line.
Truly. But, okay, throwing a regular layman into Bethnal Green doesn't magically solve the problem overnight.
No, not at all.
Because when these lay missionaries actually knocked on these doors, they didn't find a bunch of, lapsed Anglicans just waiting to be guided back to the flock.
No, they found a completely alien culture. The culture shock was just staggering for these missionaries.
What were they accepting?
They walked in expecting religious indifference. People who just hadn't been to church in a while.
Right.
But instead, they encountered total religious ignorance and this intense anti-clericalism.
Meaning they actively hated the clergy.
Deeply hated them. There was this ingrained hostility toward anyone representing the church.
Which brings us back to that story from the intro. The white paternoster.
Yes. Take that story. A missionary enters this cramped, damp room, finds a poor woman, and just assumes she at least knows the basics of Christian prayer.
Like the Lord's Prayer, maybe?
Right. But instead, she recites this medieval folklore rhyme.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, bless the bed that I lay on.
Exactly. It proved that Orthodox religious transmission had completely, totally broken down.
And the working class view of the church itself was incredibly cynical, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it from their perspective.
Right. If you're a Victorian factory worker breaking your back for pennies a day,
yeah,
religion just looks like what they called the parson's trade.
The parson's trade, yeah. They saw it as a literal money-making scam designed to keep the rich comfortable and the poor docile.
So you have this massive cultural wall. How did the London City Mission respond to that?
Initially, they responded very poorly.
Oh, no. What did they do?
They decided to launch what they considered 3 great crusades.
Okay, crusades rarely end well. What was the first one?
First, they fought against popular fairs. They saw these street fairs as nothing but hotbeds of drinking and vice.
I mean, they probably were, but it's the only fun the workers had.
Exactly. Then second, they campaigned really hard for Sabbatarian laws.
Which means closing things down on Sundays, right?
They pushed the government to close all pubs and stop all commerce on Sundays.
Wow. Okay, and a third crusade.
Third, they went to war against infidel socialism.
Infidel socialism? That sounds intense.
It was. They were specifically targeting the followers of a man named Robert Owen.
The Owenites.
Yes, the Owenites.
Yeah.
These are political radicals who advocated for a complete restructuring of society, shared property, and even the abolition of Orthodox religion and traditional marriage.
Okay, now I just have to step back and look at this tactically.
Yeah.
Put yourself in the shoes of that exhausted factory worker we just talked about.
Okay.
You work 6 days a week in brutal, unsafe conditions.
Yep.
Your one single day of rest is Sunday. And suddenly, these middle-class missionaries show up in your neighborhood, acting as the morality police, telling you that you can't have a pint at the pub on your only a day off.
It's rough.
From a marketing standpoint, that seems guaranteed to just massively backfire.
Oh, it did backfire. The resentment was immediate and it was fierce.
I bet. You don't win hearts and minds by policing the tiny bits of leisure people have when they are literally just trying to survive.
Exactly. This blanket approach of standing on a soapbox and just yelling at people to be more moral, it hit a brick wall.
So they had to pivot.
They did. The LCM quickly realized that if they actually wanted to connect with people, they couldn't just yell at them.
Right.
They had to transition into highly targeted, specialized operations based on shared experience and immediate practical needs.
And this pivot right here is where we really see the accidental birth of social work.
Yes, it's fascinating. By the 1850s, the LCM essentially stops the one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay, what do they do instead of?
They start deploying agents to highly specific demographics.
Who?
Well, for example, they sent dedicated missionaries to work exclusively with cabmen.
Cabmen, like taxi drivers.
Basically, yeah. The horse-drawn cabmen, they had their own unique subculture and brutal working hours, so they needed a specific approach.
That makes sense. Who else?
They sent people to work specifically with the police. They also set up these famous midnight meetings for prostitutes.
Midnight meetings, what were those?
It was a total shift in strategy. Instead of lecturing these women on the street, they offered a hot meal, a safe space, and a tangible, physical alternative to street life.
Wow, so actual practical help.
Yes. They also focused heavily on the military, especially during the Crimean War.
Oh, right. The Crimean War was huge at this time.
Yeah, and this military outreach gained massive public traction after an author named Catherine Marsh wrote a wildly popular bestseller.
What was the book about?
It was about a pious evangelical soldier named Captain Headley Vickers. The Victorian public just ate it up.
So they are specializing, but there is one development here that just seems completely groundbreaking for the era.
You're talking about Ellen Ranyard.
Yes, Ellen Ranyard and her Bible mission in 1857. Let's really dive deep into this because to me, this is the massive turning point.
It absolutely is. So Ranyard observed the slums and she realized something really crucial.
What was it?
She realized that middle-class men, even the well-meaning laymen of the LCM, could only penetrate so far into the actual domestic lives of the poor.
Right, because at the end of the day, they're still outsiders.
Exactly. So she launched an entirely new mechanism. She decided to employ poor working-class women to minister to their peers.
Wow.
And these women became known as Bible nurses.
Bible nurses, I love that. Because instead of an outsider judging a family, you suddenly have an insider.
Right, someone who actually understands the brutal reality of daily survival in a slum.
But they weren't just showing up and reading scripture, right? They were bringing actual medical advice.
Yes, and this is the critical innovation. They were armed with Florence Nightingale's nursing notes.
Florence Nightingale, like the pioneer of modern nursing.
The very same. These working-class women were walking into these horrific, typhus-ridden lodging houses equipped with Nightingale's cutting-edge instructions.
Like what kind of instructions?
Things that seem basic now, but were revolutionary then. Stuff on proper ventilation, the use of carbolic soap, basic hygiene.
So they were physically doing the work.
Oh, yeah. They were physically treating bed sores, changing bandages on infectious diseases, and bringing a level of sanitation to places the government had completely, utterly abandoned.
And they were doing all this while offering spiritual solace.
Yes. And crucially, they were paid a wage for this work.
Which effectively makes them the very first professional social workers in England.
That's exactly how historians view them.
It's incredible. They went in as spiritual door-to-door salesmen, essentially. But because they had Nightingale's notes, they effectively became the city's first public health inspectors.
Yep, because think about the logistics of this era.
Okay.
If you're a Victorian politician or a wealthy aristocrat, you are absolutely not stepping foot inside a disease-infested slum.
No way. You'd stay far away in your nice townhouse.
Right. So the only outsiders actually going inside these multifamily, windowless, horrible rooms were these missionaries.
Which means they were the only ones who actually knew what was going on.
Exactly. Which created this massive, completely unprecedented information pipeline.
Oh, like they were gathering data.
Yes. The city missionaries became the ultimate data gatherers for the government.
Really? Like taking notes?
Literal notes. Yeah. Every single day, they were taking notes on their surroundings. How many families were crammed into a single 10-by-10 room?
Wow.
The total lack of running water, the horrific infant mortality rates, they wrote it all down.
And what did they do with those notebooks?
They took them and provided the raw, undeniable statistics to major social reformers of the day.
People like Lord Shaftesbury.
Lord Shaftesbury, exactly. And the pioneering investigative journalist Henry Mayhew. Without the gritty, on-the-ground audits gathered by these religious workers, the massive public health and sanitation laws of the late Victorian era would have had absolutely no data to stand on.
That is just wild. So their deep involvement in the physical realities of the poor fundamentally shifted the entire government's approach to public health.
It did. They proved that you can't just hand a starving sick person a religious tract and expect them to care.
Right. You have to treat their typhus and, fix their plumbing first.
You'll have to address the physical before you can ever hope to address the spiritual.
But, okay, if they are changing their approach to the people so drastically, they must have had to change the physical spaces where this outreach happened, too.
What do you mean?
Well, if the working class viewed traditional religion as a rich man's scam, building more grand Gothic stone churches wasn't going to work. A ragged, soot-covered dock worker is going to feel entirely judged walking into a pristine sanctuary full of well-dressed middle-class families.
Well, that psychological barrier was immense. You're completely right.
So where did they meet?
They realized they needed entirely new architectural and social spaces. And this birthed an entirely new phenomenon called the mission hall movement.
Mission halls. So what did those look like?
The missionaries realized they needed physical spaces that felt completely unpretentious. So they just started renting out old storefronts.
Oh, clever.
Yeah. Abandoned warehouses, shabby rooms, right in the dead center of the slum streets.
Just blending right in.
Exactly. These mission halls had simple wooden benches, a warm stove in the winter, and just a very welcoming, judgment-free atmosphere.
So you could walk in wearing your filthy work clothes, completely covered in soot from the factory.
And no one would look twice at you. They functioned as informal community centers, makeshift medical clinics, and places of worship, all combined into one.
That is so practical.
It was.
So let's step back and look at the grand scheme of this entire movement.
Okay.
From the wealthy brewers forcing the bishops to compromise, all the way down to the Bible nurses treating bed sores in these rented storefronts.
It's a huge shift.
It is. What does this all mean? Like, did it actually work?
Well, that depends on how you define work.
Okay, let's evaluate their primary goal first. Did they manage to spiritually convert the entire working class of London to Orthodox Anglicanism?
If we judge them strictly by that original stated goal of mass Orthodox theological conversion, then the answer is pretty solidly no.
No.
Okay.
No.
The working class did not suddenly transform into a mirror image of the middle-class churchgoers.
So they didn't all become prim and proper Victorians?
They didn't. However, the missionaries ended up creating what historians now call a diffusive Christianity.
Diffusive Christianity, meaning it kind of just seeped into the culture.
Exactly. It was a broader cultural shift.
Yeah.
The influence of the missions promoted general respectability, temperance, basic education.
Rather than demanding deep, rigid theological adherence.
Right. They shifted the moral baseline of the slums without converting everyone into a theologian.
Okay, so they might have failed at their primary goal of mass conversion. But it sounds to me like they succeeded in a far more urgent, worldly goal.
Which is?
They basically kept the city from tearing itself apart during an era of completely unprecedented inequality.
The historical sources strongly point to that exact conclusion.
Really?
Yes. The sheer magnitude of the suffering they addressed meant that they created a massive social safety net where absolutely none had existed before.
Because the government certainly wasn't doing it.
Not at all. They provided crucial health care. They opened up legitimate professional pathways for working-class women to enter public life.
Like the Bible nurses.
Exactly. And perhaps most surprisingly of all, given where we started this conversation.
Oh, the warring factions.
Right. They proved that bitterly warring Protestant factions could actually put aside their deep theological and political hatred to work together for a common cause.
They dropped the Jenga blocks.
They did. By addressing the urgent physical needs of the poor, they had this profoundly pacifying and stabilizing effect on Victorian social relations. And remember, this was during a decade when violent revolution seemed like a very real, very terrifying threat to the establishment.
So let's pull all these threads together.
Let's do it.
We started by looking at a society locked in toxic tribal disputes, fiercely guarding their ideological Jenga towers while the city around them completely collapsed.
Yep.
We took a deep dive into a mission that began as a desperate attempt to just save souls.
But the brutal reality of the slums forced a massive pivot.
It forced religious enemies to unite. It exposed horrific living conditions to the blind upper classes, and it accidentally pioneered modern social work and nursing.
It's an incredible legacy.
They bridged a massive, seemingly insurmountable ideological divide, not by debating theology in a newspaper,
Right.
but by focusing entirely on the practical physical needs of the human beings suffering right in front of them.
It is a really profound historical reminder.
What's the takeaway for you?
That sometimes the sheer magnitude of a practical crisis is the only mechanism powerful enough to shatter deeply entrenched tribalism.
Wow.
When abstract theoretical debates collide with the brutal, immediate reality of human suffering, the theory often has to just step aside to make room for practical action.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a really provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up today.
I love this part.
Because, look, we live in our own era of intense political and ideological polarization.
We definitely do.
Where the divides between us feel just as unbridgeable as they did in the 1820s.
Oh, absolutely.
So, what is the modern slum? What undeniable practical crisis in our world today might be the key to forcing us to drop our tribal disputes, look past our own ideological purity, and actually work together to fix the plumbing?
History strongly suggests that finding the answer to that question might be the only way forward.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. We started by looking at a crashing societal system. Maybe the fix isn't arguing over the ruse of the system, but finally looking at the people who are just trying to survive it. Catch you next time.